when I quit school the second time, was not upset with me at all. She really just said, it's okay. You don't have to work, but I mean, you don't have to go to school, but you are going to have to get a job and find a way to, sustain your life. But at no point was my mother really upset with me for making any of the decision I made. Probably my mother was my biggest fan in my entire life. And even my brothers and my sister would probably say so. My mom really adored me, and she took care to make that clear to me as often as she could. It didn't matter. Even if I was making stupid decisions, my mom was behind me 100%.
And I really, having a mother like that, I feel like it's a blessing, because sometimes out there, parents have this thing of pushing their dreams onto their children, and in a way blame you for taking the wrong decision, asking you, why did you take the wrong decision, in terms of not doing what you love instead of doing what will make money. And I was just, we were speaking about communication, I just realized that you are a podcaster, a doctor, a keynote speaker, and you wrote some essays and books. And it really, I would say that it really connects in terms of this thing. And also, through doing all these things, I just want to start with the podcast. At what point did you think that it's time to start a podcast now?
Yeah. The first time I thought about starting a podcast, I actually didn't start one then. That was several years ago. I realized that I was a good speaker, and I realized that I was a good listener, and that I had interviewed thousands and thousands of people, probably had over 30,000, maybe closer to 40,000 people who have called me their doctor in my life. And I knew that podcasting would be a good place to share my thoughts and to actually learn from other people. But I hesitated because, there's a lot of technical things you have to do. You have to learn how to post-produce, and you have to learn how to, invite, and you have to put together pitches. And you have to say, there's all sorts of things. You're a podcaster. It takes some kind of energy. I wasn't quite ready to do that. But I finally had a business manager who was already a little familiar with podcasting. And I created a podcast in 2019 called Welcome to Humanity. And the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I got to interview some of the more powerful people that I had ever met. And I loved that podcast. And I was given people really loved, I got high scores, and people really loved the conversations I had. And that I really began to learn that podcasting is the best place, at least in the virtual world, to have any kind of conversation. We're free and easy here. We are not going to get censored here. We own this information. We get to take it home. We get to download it ourselves. It's not the social media, and it's not really YouTube. And there's a free and capable way of communicating that which really matters to us right here inside of a podcast. Now, that's not entirely true. Don't ask Joe Rogan that, but you can see what my point is. You can get in, you can have a real conversation with somebody on a podcast, and you can direct the podcast conversation not only between you and the host, or you. I love being a guest, but even when I'm the host and the guest, but also you have this listenership that is listening because they want to be there. They listen right up to the very end. Right up, like anyone who's still listening to this conversation, even today, is deeply interested in what you and I are talking about. So we have a crowd here that is actually curious and interested in staying on, rather than being forced to stay on or being encouraged to stay on. And I love that as well. There's no safer and cleaner space in our entire virtual world to communicate effectively than that in podcasting. And, my course that I created called the True Voice course uses podcasting as its backdrop. And that's a great course. It has six modules and 18 lessons and 54 prompts. And I worked hard on that course. It's a great course to teach people how to find their true voice. It's called the True Voice course. And I use podcasting, all three areas of podcasting: hosting, guesting, and audience listenership, to find your true voice and then be able to express it effectively into the world. So I now have a third podcast that I host, and I did another one called Insanity with my friend Sam. We did about 20 episodes, and now I have a third one called The Healthy Healer, and I think we're on episode 120 with that one. And that's where I interview people who have become healers in a real way. Actually an honest way of healing themselves and then learning how to heal others through whatever they have learned.
So many podcasts. How do you manage on having be consistent in terms of conversations? Because definitely you don't produce the same content within all these podcasts. How do you be consistent when it comes to different types of content?
Yeah. So as a host, I just answer pitches. I tell people I have a podcast. I put it on Podmatch or put it on one of the connecting, sites where guests and hosts are introduced to each other. And then I have people answer several questions, and then I review the answers and decide whether they'll be a good fit. And then I spotlight the guest. Whatever the guest is up to, I spotlight the guest and make sure that they're at the center of the show. And really just ask them curative questions like you're asking me to learn about them. Now, it's a little bit different when I'm a guest. A lot of times most of my guest episodes, people ask me pretty similar questions, like how did I get to be who I am? What am I really up to? And, what's my present life about? And how does my practice? And what books have I written? And what courses have I created? And what podcasts have I created? And what do I do for coaching? And what is the undoctor? And all those things. Then by now I have answers to those questions that are more aligned with who I really am and how they got to be. So it's become a little bit easier to be a guest, but I try to be careful to be fresh, fresh and like on time, fresh and contemporary, like really with whatever, fresh and present with every single conversation I have, including, of course, the one I'm having with you right now.
And you mentioned something that it has become easier now for you to answer such questions. When you started being a guest, did you have any type of anxiety in terms of if a podcaster asked you a question and you didn't know the answer to that question? Were you honest enough, or you tried by any means to answer that question?
That's a good question. I believe there's probably been times that I was a little bit nervous about what questions could come from a host. I'm not very nervous anymore. When you're in this field for 45 years, you get asked pretty much every single question that's out there. And I've had to field most every question that anybody might ever develop. So it's unlikely that you're about to ask me a question that's really going to put me back on my heels so far that I'm going to feel out of place. But maybe you will. If you want to try to do it, you can. But normally what I do, I have already developed ways to deflect answers a little bit so that I don't have to be too painful about my answers. And I've, and as well as ways to answer your question effectively with entertainment and education as a primary goal.
That's a nice strategy in terms of reflecting such questions. And also you spoke about the true voice. Spoke about the true voice. So how has it had impacted your students in terms of?
So True Voice is an important part of my sub brand. I guess it's something that the True Voice podcasting. I taught a course called True Voice Podcasting. I have the True Voice course, and then my second book is actually called Find Your True Voice. And so what we do with that is we really help people rediscover what's at the center of their life, what's really important to them. And normally it's something that's been important to them for their entire life, but it's become obscure over time. The crack in the cement was made when we were a child, and it's got larger and larger, and we've not gone back to repair it. So many of us pretend to be people that we're not in order to protect the person that we are. And that's just a common human experience, and that's not true voice. That's an ingenuine, non-authentic way of speaking. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people, and sometimes even me, I suppose, who sometimes even says things that they don't believe. People who actually say things that even they don't believe. Like, it's just crazy. We've reached a point of such absurdity. It's so ludicrous. It's so preposterous that we're willing to say things that even we don't think are true, as if we mean it. Now, that's not even lying anymore. That's actually lying to ourselves, which is all, when we lie to somebody, at least we know we're lying. I'm saying in this case, we actually tell ourselves that we believe something even if we don't. Now, what True Voice does is it takes incremental steps in helping people really get reconnected to what's important to them at their core self. What is their authentic being really calling forward? how can we take those incremental steps with the people in our world and start speaking a little bit more honestly to what it is that really matters to us, moving things out of the way that are in the way of that are, prevent us from actually accessing that is the goal of the True Voice course. And it's also the goal of the Find Your True Voice book. All we really have to do is really find what makes our own heart sing. And we do that not by going out there to see what makes our heart sing. What makes your heart sing is already here in your heart. So it's about moving away the cobwebs, moving away the muck, moving away the dirt and the rust, and getting, in fact, to the center of what really matters to us, and then speaking open and honestly to the people in our inner circle. Start off incrementally, make small steps, say something new to somebody that you haven't said forever. Maybe you're going to tell them that you stole $20 from them 5 years ago. That's fine. Or you might tell them that you love them, or you might tell them that you think they're great, or you might tell them anything. But if you start talking honestly, I think people tend to see that being authentic and honest is a whole lot easier than being dishonest and inauthentic. My other brother who was with us yesterday, he reminded us that when you lie, you have to remember so much. You have to remember who you said what to, and then make sure that you say the same thing next time you see them, or if you see a friend of theirs who might have thought, it's so much work to lie consistently. But when you're honest, you could just tell the truth on the spot of exactly what's so. And you don't have to stutter or stammer at all. You just kind of tell the truth the way it is, which I would say I'm getting close to doing right now. And that's really, really important. Authenticity is way more attractive than any kind of agreement. A lot of people think that if you agree with somebody, you avoid conflict. But that's not really true. If you're authentic with somebody, you avoid conflict, and you open up the space for them to be authentic, whether or not they agree with you. And that's what we want more than anything, is authentic conversations. And it doesn't really matter if the person on the other side agrees with you on any issue whatsoever.
And I feel like the thing that you just said, being lying to yourself, has had a great deal when it comes to mental health, because some people have created scenarios in their brain of telling myself that I'm the best, lying to yourself in terms of, or just throwing some, I would say, bad connotations towards yourself, that I'm not worth it, I don't deserve to be here, in terms of I feel like through that, some people can learn a lot from the course in general, but not only for podcasting, but in general, saying in terms of their well-being, because I've seen people end up committing things they are not, I would say, did not represent their self or personality as a whole. So as I've said, that the conversation is 30 minutes. I'm saying that we almost out of time. Before we go, I just want to throw a last question towards you. For our listeners who may be considering a career in mental health, what advice or words of wisdom would you offer?
Well, I think the best advice I have for somebody, people don't ask me this question, this is kind of a new one. For people who are considering a career in mental health, I think that the most important thing to get is that person that you're treating over there, that person that came through to you for no help, is no less than you. No less, no different. Is not less of a person, even if they've been given a diagnosis in the past. They're just another person that's on a journey with you, this journey called life. And it's really important to see them eye to eye, lateral to lateral, human to human when you're talking to somebody. I think most people pretend that that's how they see people, but if someone has a diagnosis of depression, anxiety, or even worse, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or ADHD or a spectrum disorder or whatever, people tend to look down on them as if they're afflicted with something, and they, you don't want to catch their disease. They might be contagious, or they might, in some ways we look down on them, thinking that they're coming to us for something we have that they don't have. It does much better to actually meet somebody straight on, as if they too have a life just like ours, exactly like ours, no less, no more. And they're struggling with life and all the many challenges, obstacles, and hurdles that life has to offer, just like we are. And if we can connect to people, all ages, all types, all conditions, all upbringings, all levels of trauma, and really getting that we are really all the same, the same people. And what we want more than anything isn't for that. We may want somebody to give us the answers, but nobody else out there can really give us the answer. The answer lies in communicating and connecting